Hi everybody, welcome to the Art of Creation show. I am your host, Rebecca Boswell, your coach for the next hour, and who knows, maybe in the future. We are still playing with the notion, concept, possibility that choice creates, that the choices that we engage in actually create the life and the living that shows up for us. So finding what those choices are, becoming aware of what those choices are, and becoming aware of the points where we may shift those choices in order to shift what's showing up, becomes the space of magic that we get to play with. If you are new to the Art of Creation show, this is season 7. In the first 6 seasons, we have interviews with a bunch of different guests on a whole slew of different topics. So you're invited to go back and watch those previous episodes. This season, we are reading from the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And this is our 8th episode, I believe. So we are going to be reading 2 chapters today. And the 2 chapters that we're going to be reading today are in part 5, Living Life. And the chapters are Contemplating Death and The Secret of the Middle Way. We have 1 chapter left next week to conclude the reading of this book. So if you haven't watched the previous episodes, you are invited to go to the beginning of the playlist and binge through everything. No need to watch, just listen and relax and release, see what shows up. So we will begin with Contemplating Death. And a quick note to please click the notification bell for those of you who ever watch on Facebook when this is live, so that if and when we have time changes for the lives, for the recordings, that you are notified when we are here. So chapter 17, Contemplating Death. It is truly a great cosmic paradox that one of the best teachers in all of life turns out to be death. No person or situation could ever teach you as much as death has to teach you. While someone could tell you that you are not your body, death shows you. While someone could remind you of this insignificance of the things that you cling to, death takes them all away in a second. While people can teach you that men and women of all races are equal and that there is no difference between the rich and the poor, death instantly makes us all the same. The question is, are you going to wait until the last moment to let death be your teacher? The mere possibility of death has the power to teach us at any moment. A wise person realizes that at any moment they may breathe out and the breath may not come back in. It could happen any time, in any place, and your last breath is gone. You have to learn from this. A wise being completely and totally embraces the reality, the inevitability, and the unpredictability of death. Anytime you're having trouble with something, think of death. Let's say you're the jealous type and you can't stand anyone being close to your mate. Think about what will happen when you're no longer here. Is it really all that romantic that your loved one should live alone with no one to care for them? If you can get past your personal issues, you'll find that you want the person you love to be happy and to have a full and beautiful life. Since that is what you want for them, why are you bothering them now just for talking to someone? It shouldn't take death to challenge you to live at your highest level. Why wait until everything is taken from you before you learn to dig down deep inside yourself to reach your highest potential? A wise person affirms, if with one breath all of this can change, then I want to live at the highest level while I'm alive. I'm going to stop bothering the people I love. I'm going to live life from the deepest part of my being. This is the consciousness necessary for deep and meaningful relationships. Look how callous we get with our loved ones. We take it for granted that they're there and that they'll continue to be there for us. What if they died? What if you died? What if you knew that this evening would be the last time you'd get to see them? Imagine that an angel comes down and tells you, straighten up your affairs. You will not awaken from your sleep tonight. You're coming to me. Then you'd know that every person you see that day, you'd be seeing for the last time. How would you feel? How would you interact with them? Would you even bother with the little grudges and complaints you've been carrying around? How much love could you give the ones you love, knowing it would be the last time you'd get to be with them? Think about what it would be like if you lived like this every moment with everyone. Your life would be really different. You should contemplate this. Death is not a morbid thought. Death is the greatest teacher in all of life. Take a moment to look at the things you think you need. Look at how much time and energy you put into various activities. Imagine if you knew you were going to die within a week or a month. How would that change things? How would your priorities change? How would your thoughts change? Think honestly about what you would do with your last week. What a wonderful thought to contemplate. Then ponder this question. If that's really what you would do with your last week, what are you doing with the rest of your time? Wasting it? Throwing it away? Treating it like it's not something precious? What are you doing with life? That is what death asks you. Hi, glad you're here. So we're reading from The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. We're on chapter 15. Let's say you're living life without the thought of death, and the angel of death comes to you and says, "Come, it's time to go." You say, "But no, you're supposed to give me a warning so I can decide what I want to do with my last week. I'm supposed to get one more week." Do you know what death will say to you? He'll say, "My God, I gave you 52 weeks this past year alone, and look at all the other weeks I've given you. Why would you need one more? What did you do with all those?" If asked that, what are you going to say? How will you answer? "I wasn't paying attention. I didn't think it mattered," you might say. That's a pretty amazing thing to say about life. Death is a great teacher, but who lives with this level of awareness? It doesn't matter what age you are. At any time, you could take a breath and there may never be another. It happens all the time to babies, to teenagers, to people in midlife, not just to the aged. One breath and they're gone. No one knows when their time will be. That's not how it works. So why not be bold enough to regularly reflect on how you would live that last week? If you were to ask this question of people who are truly awakened, they wouldn't have any problem answering you. Not a thing would change inside of them. Not a thought would cross their minds. If death were to come in an hour, if death were to come in a week, or if death were to come in a year, they would live exactly the same way as they're living now. There is not a single thing that they carry inside of their hearts that they would rather be doing. In other words, they're living their lives fully and are not making compromises or playing games with themselves. You have to be willing to look at what it would be like if death was staring you in the face. Then you have to come to peace within yourself so that it doesn't make any difference whether it is or not. There is a story of a great yogi who said that every moment of his life he felt as though a sword were suspended above his head by a spider web. He lived his life with the awareness that he was that close to death. You are that close to death. Every time you get in the car, every time you walk across the street, and every time you eat something, it could be the last thing you do. Do you realize that what you're doing at any moment is something that someone was doing when they died? He died eating dinner. He died in a car accident 2 miles from home. She died in a plane wreck on a trip to New York. He went to bed and never woke up. At some point, this is how it happened to somebody. No matter what you're doing, you can be sure somebody died that way. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, dramatic music. You must not be afraid to discuss death. Don't get uptight about it. Instead, let this knowledge help you to live every moment of your life fully, because every moment matters. That's what happens when somebody knows they only have a week left. You can be certain that they would tell you that the most important week they ever had was that last week. Everything is 1,000,000 times more meaningful in that final week. What if you were to live every week that way? right? So it's not about, getting locked down in the quagmire of death or morbidity, but it's about, wow, how can I completely enjoy, right? Suck the marrow from life. How can I enjoy it fully with no regrets? I mean, of course, regrets, there's judgment involved there, but free and clear. So at this point, you should also ask yourself why you aren't living that way already. You are going to die. You know that. You just don't know when. Every single thing will be taken from you. You will leave behind your possessions, your loved ones, and all your hopes and dreams for this life. You'll be taken right out of where you are. You'll no longer be able to fill the roles you were so busy playing. Death changes everything in a flash. That's the reality of the situation. If all these things can be changed in an instant, then maybe they aren't so real after all. Maybe you'd better check out who you are. Maybe look deeper. Right? And this also applies to in the previous chapters when we talked about relaxing and releasing and moving through those disturbances instead of resisting and reacting to the disturbance and trying to protect yourself from them, right? Ultimately, when we boil it all down, it could actually be fear of death, right? That keeps us in that box. But if we recognize and come to terms with death in some way where it doesn't have that hold, well, then we don't have to protect ourselves from it in such a way that it keeps us from living what we're living now. Yeah? So it's all related. And it's actually really cool. Embracing life, knowing that each moment, each breath is actually a gift. So the beauty of embracing deep truths is that you don't have to change your life. You just change how you live your life. It's not what you're doing, it's how much of you is doing it, right? What are you being? How are you showing up? Let's take a very simple example. You've walked outside thousands of times, but how many times have you really appreciated it? Imagine a person in a hospital bed who has just been told they've got a week to live. They look up at the doctor and say, "Can I walk outside? Can I look at the sky just one more time?" If it were raining outside, they would want to feel the rain just once more. For them, that would be the most precious thing. But you don't want to feel the rain. You run and cover up. What is it that won't let us live our lives? What is inside of us that is so afraid that it keeps us from just enjoying life? This part of us is so busy trying to make sure the next thing goes right that we can't just be here now and live life. All the while, death is watching our footsteps. Don't you want to live before death comes? You're probably not going to get a warning. Very few people are told when they're going to die. Almost everybody just takes a breath and doesn't know they didn't take another. So start using every day to let go of that sacred part of you, that scared part of you, right? Maybe that's a little slip, right? We hold that part of us so sacred that we're unwilling to disrupt it. And yet that's the part that keeps us in limitation. So what if it wasn't sacred anymore? So start using every day to let go of that scared part of you that won't let you live life fully. Since you know you're going to die, be willing to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. Be willing to be fully present without being afraid of what will happen in the next moment. That's how people live when they face death. You get to do that too, because you are facing death every moment. Learn to live as though you are facing death at all times, and you'll become bolder and more open. If you live life fully, you won't have any last wishes. You will have lived them every moment. Only then will you have fully experienced life and released the part of you that is afraid of living. There is no reason to be afraid of life, and the fear will fade once you understand that the only thing there is to get from life is the growth that comes from experiencing it. Life itself is your career, and your interaction with life is your most meaningful relationship. Everything else you're doing is just focusing on a tiny subset of life in the attempt to give life some meaning. What actually gives life meaning is the willingness to live it. It isn't any particular event, it's the willingness to experience life's events. What if you knew that the next person you'd see would be the last person you would ever see? You'd be right there, soaking it in, experiencing it. It wouldn't matter what they were saying. You'd just enjoy hearing the words because it would be the last conversation you'd ever have. What if you brought that kind of awareness to every conversation? That's what happens when you're told that death is around the corner. You change. Life doesn't change. The true seeker commits to live like every moment. Oh, okay. The true seeker commits to live like that every moment and lets nothing stop them. So I'm having something show up with my eyes. So you guys get to see me in glasses today. I don't wear them often, but I'm going to wear them today because my eyes are swimming. I don't know what's going on. How's it getting any better? So where was I? Okay. Oh yes, now I can see the words. The true seeker commits to live like that every moment and lets nothing stop them. Why should anything stop you? You're just going to die anyway. If you challenge yourself to live as though it were your last week, your mind may come up with all kinds of suppressed desires. It may start talking about all the things that you've always wanted to do, and you may think you had better go do them. You will soon see that's not the answer. You have to understand that it is your attempt to get special experiences from life that makes you miss the actual experience of life. Life is not something you get, it's something you experience. Life exists with or without you. It has been going on for billions of years. You simply get the honor of seeing a tiny slice of it. If you're busy trying to get something, you will miss the slice you're actually experiencing. Every one of life's experiences is different, and every experience is worth having. Life is not something to waste, it's truly precious. That's why death is such a great teacher. It is death that makes life precious. Look how precious life becomes when you imagine you only have a week left to live. How precious would life be if there was no such thing as death? You'd waste every second of it because you'd figure you'd always have it. It is scarcity that makes things precious. It is scarcity that makes a simple rock become a rare gem. And that's kind of interesting, right? Like kind of that thing of where the shadow actually accentuates the light, right? That thing of no right or wrong, and also seeing all aspects of things, and all aspects have their own gift that they can offer. Even scarcity. Who would have thunk? So death actually gives meaning to life. Death is your friend. Death is your liberator. For God's sake, do not be afraid of death. Try to learn what it's saying to you. The highest way to learn is to take each moment of your life and realize that what matters is to live it fully. If you live each moment completely, you will have a fuller life and you will not have to fear death. I mean, how much time in our lifetime? I'm just curious. I don't know the answer. But like, how much time have we experienced fear? Fear, which ultimately, right, I wonder, can we boil it down to fear of death, right? I'd be so curious to see the proportion, right, of that time. And even if it was just 20%, 10%, or 80%, if we could actually see that, I wonder how that would lead us to different choices or inspire different choices. Might be a cool experiment, just even in your day, to notice when you're experiencing fear and allowing that to take over, and just notice how much time in my 24-hour period did I actually give my power to fear. Let me know how that goes. I'm going to try too. So you fear death because you crave life. You fear death because you think there's something to get that you haven't experienced yet. I love that. You fear death because you crave life, right? And yet fear of death actually robs our experience of life when we let it. That thing that we're actually craving. We are so funny. We're such funny animals. Okay, many people feel that death will take something away from them. The wise person realizes that death is constantly giving them something. Death is giving meaning to life. You're the one who throws your life away. You waste every second of it. You get in your car, drive from here to there, and you don't see anything. You've not even been there. You're busy thinking about what you're going to do next. You're a month ahead of yourself, or even a year. You're not living life, you're living mind. Or in the past, perhaps. So it is you who throws your life away, not death. Death actually helps you get your life back by making you pay attention to the moment. It makes you say, my God, I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose my children. This could be the last time I'll see them. From now on, I'm going to pay more attention to them and to my spouse and to all my friends and loved ones. I want to get so much more out of life. If you are living every experience fully, then death doesn't take anything from you. There's nothing to take because you're already fulfilled. That's why the wise being is always ready to die. It doesn't make any difference when death comes because their experience is already whole and complete. Suppose you loved music more than anything else. You always wanted to hear your favorite classical composition played by your favorite orchestra. That was the dream of your life. Finally, it happens. You're there and you're actually hearing it. It completely fills you. The very first notes lift you to where you needed to go. This shows you that it only takes a moment to become absorbed in a transcendental peace. You really don't need more time before death. What you need is more depth of experience during the time that you're given. That's the way to live each moment of your life. You let it fill you completely. You let it touch you to the depths of your being. There is no moment that can't do that, even if something terrible happens. View it as just another experience of life, right? No right, no wrong, no good, no bad. Just what is. Without the lenses and the projections, the expectations, the judgments, all the mind stuff that we overlay. Death has made you a great promise in which you can find deep peace. The promise is that all things are temporal. They are all just passing through time and space. If you have patience, this too will pass. The wise realize that in the end, life belongs to death. Death is the one who comes in his own time to take life from you. Death is the landlord and you are just the tenant. People say things like, he's living on borrowed time, or he got a new lease on life. From whom did he borrow the time? From death, of course. Death is the one who comes to claim his property because it has always belonged to him. You should have a healthy relationship with death, and it should not be one of fear. Feel grateful for death, for giving you another day and another experience, and for creating the scarcity that makes life so precious. If you do this, your life will no longer be yours to waste. It will be yours to appreciate. Death is an ultimate reality of life. The yogis and saints fully embrace death. St. Paul said, "O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory?" Great beings don't mind speaking of death. Yogis have traditionally gone into graveyards and burning ghats to meditate. They sit there to remind themselves of the frailty of the body and the inevitability of death. Buddhists are taught to contemplate the temporal nature of things. It is all temporal, and death says this to you. So instead of getting lost in the normal mental chatter, why not contemplate the temporal nature of life? Why not think about something meaningful? Don't be afraid of death. Let it free you. Let it encourage you to experience life fully. But remember, it's not your life. You should be experiencing the life. So this is where we might have a slight departure in philosophy. But Michael Singer says, you should be experiencing the life that's happening to you, not the one you wish was happening. And so that's where I'd say the life that you're co-creating with all the other things together. And I would also agree here, though, that when we get away from acknowledging what is, that's when we start to try to control more than we actually have the capacity to control. Right? It's like, oh, I wish that it was this other way, instead of seeing what is and then actually making choices that could help create something different. So anyway, just a different way of looking at that. So don't waste a moment of life trying to make other things happen. Appreciate the moments you are given. Don't you understand that every minute you're a step closer to death? This is how to live your life. You live it as though you are on the verge of death, because you are. And isn't that so interesting, right? That's like the whole notion of everything is the opposite of what it appears to be. Nothing is the opposite of what it appears to be, right? Like, to fully embrace death actually gives you full capacity for living. So the next chapter is a much shorter chapter. It's just a few pages. It's chapter 18. Oh, I said we were reading chapter 15 before, I think. It was chapter 17. Yeah, we just skipped ahead. Okay, so chapter 18, The Secret of the Middle Way. No discussion of living a life as a spiritual path is complete without addressing one of the deepest of all spiritual teachings, the Tao Te Ching. So, and again, for those of you who may be tuning in now, in the beginning of the book, when he talked about spiritual and worldly, what he's referring to with this word, spiritual, is simply where you find your power and tap into your power within and allow it to come out, as opposed to looking out in the world for your worth, for your power, for everything that is you. Okay? It's about finding that seat of consciousness. He would say from within. And I might suggest the possibility of when you're in a completely expanded space. So literally translated, this means the way. The Tao is so subtle that one can only talk around its edges, but never actually touch it, right? Like trying to grab a cloud. Good luck. In that treatise, the very basis for the principles of all of life is laid down. It is a treatise on the balance of the yin and the yang, the feminine and the masculine, the dark and the light. You could easily read the Tao Te Ching and never understand a single word, or you could read it and tears could pour from your eyes with every word you read. The question is, do you bring to it the knowledge, the understanding, and the basis for comprehending what it is attempting to express? Unfortunately, spiritual teachings often mask the essence of truth with mystical words. But this balance, this Tao, is actually very simple. Those who have truly learned the secrets of life recognize these truths without having read anything. If you want to understand the Tao, you must take it very slowly and keep it very simple. Otherwise, you may miss it, though it is right in front of you. It is best to approach the Tao through some very simple, almost theoretical questions. For example, is it good for a person to eat sometimes? Yes, obviously it is. It is good for a person to eat. Is it good for a person to eat all the time? No, of course not. Somewhere in between, you passed over the Tao. Is it good to fast periodically? Yes. Is it good to never eat? No. The pendulum can swing all the way from gorging yourself to death to starving yourself to death. Those are the two extremes of the pendulum, the yin and the yang, expansion and contraction, non-doing and doing. Everything has two extremes. Everything has gradations of this pendulum swing. If you go to the extremes, you cannot survive. That's how extreme the extremes are. For example, do you like hot weather? How about 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit? You'd be instantly vaporized. Do you like cold weather? How about absolute zero? The molecules of your body would never move again. Let's use an example that is a little less extreme. Do you like being close to another person? How about being so close that you're never apart? You eat every meal together, you go everywhere together, and you do everything together. When you talk on the phone, you always use a speakerphone so that both of you can partake in every conversation. You want to be so close that you're the same person. How long do you think that could last? That's one extreme in human relationships. The other extreme is that you want your own space. You do your own thing. You're independent. You like being separate so that you always have something to share with each other when you're together. How independent are you? Well, you travel separately, you eat separately, and you live in separate houses. At what point are you so separate that no one can figure out if you're having a relationship? You haven't seen each other for years. Both of these extremes will end up the same. Too close, too far away. In either case, you won't be talking to each other before long. Everything has its extremes, its yin and its yang. Now let's get a little subtler. The 6,000 degree temperature doesn't sound so good, and absolute zero doesn't sound so interesting either. Neither does starving to death nor eating until you're sick. But that part about being so close to somebody that you're always together may sound pretty nice. You may at least like to give it a shot. If so, it's because your pendulum has been swung in the opposite direction for too long. You've had too much time alone, too many dinners alone, too many movies alone, and too much traveling alone. In other words, your pendulum has swung off center. From science, we know that if you pull a pendulum 30 degrees to the right, it will swing back until it's 30 degrees to the left. You don't need Lao Tzu to tell you this. All the laws are the same, inner laws and outer laws. The same principles drive everything in this world. If you pull a pendulum out one way, it will swing back just that far the other way. If you've been starving for days and somebody puts food in front of you, you won't be polite while you're eating. You will shove the food into your mouth like an animal. Like a non-human animal. I put food in my mouth like a human animal every day. Or at least that's the goal. To not have it look like some other kind of animal. But I'm sure that happens too. I digress. The degree to which you will act like an animal, asterisk, non-human animal, is the exact degree to which you were starved enough to bring up your animal instincts. So where is the Tao? The Tao is in the middle. It's the place where there is no energy pushing in either direction. The pendulum has been permitted to come to balance concerning food, relationships, sex, money, doing, not doing, and everything else. And that's where, when I talk about like being space, right? That's for me what that is like, right? That thing where there's no resistance, no tug from attachments, right? There's just that space of like, of being. Everything has its yin and yang. The way is the place in which these forces balance quietly. And indeed, unless you go out of the way, they will tend to stay in peaceful harmony. If you want to understand the Tao, you must take a closer look at what lies between the two extremes. This is because neither extreme can last. How long can a pendulum stay at one of its outermost positions? It can only remain there for a moment. How long can a pendulum stay at rest? It can remain there forever, because there are no forces moving it out of balance. That is the Tao. It is the center. But that does not mean that it stays static and fixed. We're about to see that it's much more dynamic than that, right? It's not about reaching some perfection point and never falling off. That's a different energy. So first you have to realize that since everything has its yin and yang, everything has its own balance point. It is the harmony of all these balance points woven together that forms the Tao. This overall balance maintains its equilibrium as it moves through time and space. And I love that word, equilibrium, even more so, right? Because balance, we kind of have, or I have that image or that sense of like teetering, right, on this little point. Whereas equilibrium is, right, it's like it's like where you are the tree that's able to move with the wind. That's how I perceive that. Its power is phenomenal. If you want to imagine, well, I'll go back I'm just going to start that paragraph again. First, you have to realize that since everything has its yin and yang, everything has its own balance point. It is the harmony of all these balance points woven together that forms the Tao, right? That's the equilibrium space. This overall balance maintains its equilibrium as it moves through time and space. Its power is phenomenal. If you want to imagine the power of the Tao, imagine how much energy is wasted swinging sideways. Suppose you want to go from point A to point B, but instead of walking there directly, you move from side to side like a sine wave. That would take a long time, and you would waste a lot of energy. In other words, it's not efficient to oscillate around the path. To be efficient, you must center all of your energies on the path. If you do this, the energies that used to be wasted swinging sideways will get pulled into the center. This concentration of energies is used to accomplish the given task much more efficiently. This is the power of the Tao. When you stop swinging between the opposites, you'll find that you have far more energy than you ever imagined. That which takes somebody else hours will take you minutes. That which wears out other people will draw very little of your energy, maybe even give you some, help you access more. That's the difference between struggling with the opposites versus staying centered in order to get something done. And it's those thoughts, those feelings, those emotions, those, like that stray voltage, right? That's what pulls us, right? That's what drains the energy. That's what drains the power. That's where we actually are giving our power away. That's where we're getting sucked into other people's realities, right? So this principle, that's at least one way to look at it. This principle holds true in every aspect of life. If you are in balance, you eat when it's time to eat. And not because it's on a clock, right? Your body is asking, would you nourish me, please? In a way that maintains the body. So if you are in balance, you eat when it is time to eat, in a way that maintains the health of your body. To do otherwise is to waste energy dealing with the effects of eating too little, eating too much, or eating the wrong foods. It is much more efficient, and by wrong foods, it's not a judgment wrong. It's just ones that don't serve you and your body. It is much more efficient to deal with the body in a balanced manner than to be burdened with the effects of the extremes. Basically, you waste tremendous energy at the extremes. The more extreme it is, the more it becomes a full-time project. For example, the relationship in which you insist upon being together all the time would be a full-time job. The only way you could have another job is if you both did the same work at the same desk. At the other extreme, if you had no relationship and you were lonely and depressed all the time, you couldn't accomplish much. So again, it takes all your energy to do the extremes. The inefficiency of your actions is determined by how many degrees off center you are. You will be that much less able to use your energy for living life because you are using it to adjust for the pendulum swings. Extremes are good teachers. When you examine the extremes, it's easy to see the effects of imbalanced behavior patterns. Hi! So we are on the second chapter of today's reading. We are reading from The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Glad you're here. Let's take the example of a chain smoker. He always has a cigarette in his mouth, and he's constantly lighting up another. A meaningful percentage of his life is involved in smoking. He's buying cigarettes, lighting cigarettes, and smoking cigarettes. He's also very busy trying to find places where he's allowed to smoke. And since he doesn't like having to go outside to light up, he's joined the committee in favor of allowing smoking in public places. Notice how much of his energy is going into smoking. Now, imagine that he decides to quit. Not a single cigarette will he smoke. If a year later you ask him what he did last year, he will tell you that he quit smoking. That was his life for the past year. First, he tried the chewing gum, but that didn't really help. Then he tried the patch. When that didn't work, he moved on to hypnotherapy. Because the pendulum was so far to one extreme with his smoking, it had to swing to the opposite extreme in order for him to stop smoking. Both extremes were a tremendous waste of time, energy, and effort that could have gone into more productive aspects of life. When you spend your energy trying to maintain the extremes, nothing goes forward. You get stuck in a rut. The more extreme you are, the less forward movement there is. You carve a groove and you get stuck in it. Then there's no energy moving you in the Tao, in the center, in the middle way. It's all being spent serving the extremes. The way is in the middle, because that's the place where the energies are balanced. But how do you stop the pendulum from swinging to the outer edges? Amazingly enough, you do this by leaving it alone. It won't keep swinging to the extremes unless you feed the extremes with energy. Just let the extremes go. Don't participate in them, and the pendulum will naturally come toward the center. As it comes to the center, you will get filled with energy. This is because all the energy that had been wasted is now available to you. If you choose to center and not participate in the extremes, you will come to know the Tao. You don't grab it, you don't even touch it. It's just what the energy does when it's not being used to swing toward the extremes. It finds its own way to the center of each event that takes place in life and remains quietly in the middle. The Tao is hollow, it's empty. Like the eye of a hurricane, its power is its emptiness. All things swirl around it, but it is unmoved. The swirl of life draws its energy from the center, and the center draws its energy from the swirl of life. All these laws are the same in weather, in nature, and in every aspect of your life. As you center, by not participating in the swings, the energies will naturally find their balance. And that's where we talk about relaxing and releasing, right? So when we start to bump up to these disturbances, we can relax and release. We stay in this equilibrium or expanded state. Or we resist, we react, we push, we fight, we struggle. We get caught or drawn into the disturbance. It becomes all of our reality, and that is where we get pulled off into one direction or the other. So you will become much clearer because so much energy is flowing up in you. The experience of being present in each moment will become your natural state. You won't be fixated on certain things or caught up in thoughts about the opposites. As you get clearer, life's events will actually seem to unfold in slow motion. Once this happens, events will no longer seem confusing or overwhelming, no matter what they are, right? And this is where we also look at whether we're living in polarity, right? Those opposite ends of the spectrum, right? If everything is just good or just bad, well, those are also extremes. This is quite different from how most people live. If they're driving a car and somebody cuts them off, they get upset for the next hour or maybe for the rest of the day. For the being who is in the Tao, events take place and last just as long as they take place. That's it. If you're driving and somebody cuts you off, you feel your energy start to pull off center. You actually feel it in your heart. As you let go, it comes back to center, right? That's the relax and release part. As you let go, it comes back to center. You don't follow the extremes, so your energy comes back to the current moment. When the next event happens, you're there. You're always there. And that makes you much more capable than the person who is reacting to past imbalances. Almost everyone has a point at which they get out of balance, right? Or sucked into different realities or whatever you want to call it. But once gone, who's minding the store? Who takes care of the energies that unfold while you're not there? Remember, whoever remains present with fixity of purpose comes out on top in the end, right? Because then you're also like, it's like a backlog, right? Like if things are coming through and you're stuck on it and you're now it's in the past and you're still churning with it, what about all these other things, right? It's like the assembly line. You take too long on this one thing, and every new piece that comes, it just starts to pile up and pile up and pile up until you have a big jam, right? So kind of like that with thoughts, feelings, and emotions, right? Either we notice it and we keep going, or we get stuck on it and everything builds. So when you move in the Tao, you are always present. Life becomes absolutely simple. In the Tao, it's easy to see what's happening in life. It's unfolding right in front of you. But if you have all kinds of reactions going on inside because you're involved in the extremes, life seems confusing. That's because you are confused, not because life's confusing. When you stop being confused, everything becomes simple. If you have no preference, if the only thing you want is to remain centered, then life unfolds while you simply feel for the center. There's an invisible thread that passes through everything. All things move quietly through the center balance. That is the Tao. It is really there. It is there in your relationships, in your diet, and in your business activities. It is there in everything. It is the eye of the storm. It is completely at peace. To give you an idea of what it feels like to be in that center, let's use the example of sailing. We'll begin by going sailing when there's no wind. That's one extreme, and we're not going anywhere. Now let's go sailing when there's tremendous wind, but there's no sail. That is the opposite extreme, and again, we're not going anywhere. Sailing is such a good example because there are many forces interacting together. There's the wind, the sail, the rudder, and the tension of the ropes on the sail. There is a tremendous interplay of forces. What happens if the wind is blowing and you hold the sail too loosely? It doesn't work. What if you hold it too tightly? You tip over. To sail properly, you must hold it just right. But where is just right? It is in the center point of tautness of the sail against the force of the wind. Not too much, not too little. That's what we call the sweet spot. And it's going to change. It's not always going to be at the same spot on the rope, just like in life. That sweet spot is going to change. That's what makes it a dance. That's what makes the beauty of actually being in the present moment, noticing what actually is. That's what gives us the capacity then to make a choice that's actually going to change things based on what's relevant right now. Imagine that feeling when the wind hits the sail just right and you're holding the ropes just right. You take off with a perfect feeling of balance. Then the wind shifts and you adjust to it. You, the wind, the sail, and the water are one. All the forces are in harmony. Everything's changing. And you're co-creating together. So should one force shift, the others shift at the same instant. This is what it means to move in the way, right? That's what I would call co-creation. In the Tao of sailing, the balance point is not static. It's a dynamic equilibrium. You move from balance point to balance point, from center to center, right? This is not about perfection. This is about ease of being, right? Experiencing fully, being present. You can't have any concepts or preferences. You have to let the forces move you. In the way, nothing is personal. You are merely an instrument in the hands of the forces, participating in the harmony of balance, right? And so that's, again, where I might have a slight different interpretation of that, right? Where I would say, yeah, but I am the being holding the ropes, right? So the co-creation is involving the choices that I'm making, right? Like whether I decide to resist my knowing to let out the rope, right? Or to try to outmuscle the wind, right? That I bring that to this whole dynamic, to this creation of sailing, right? So my choices of how I show up are actually going to have an interplay with all these other forces that are outside of my control. So in the way, nothing is personal. You are merely an instrument in the hands of the forces, participating in the harmony of balance. You must reach the point where your whole interest lies in the balance, and not in any personal preference for how things should be. And that's where we're talking about like the projections, the expectations, all of those solid things that we get attached to, right? So it's that way with all of life. The more you can work with the balance, the more you can just sail through life. Effortless action is what happens when you come into the Tao. Life happens, you're there, but you don't make it happen. There is no burden, there is no stress. The forces take care of themselves as you sit in the center. That is the Tao. It's the most beautiful place in all of life. You can't touch it, but you can be at one with it. And that's where we talk about choice creates, right? Because if it's not working, we can choose again, right? Because sometimes our choices don't work, right? So we choose something else. Eventually, and the more that we're in this space to see what is, the more that we can tap into the choices that keep us in that space of equilibrium and of harmony. So eventually, you will see that in the way of the Tao, you're not going to wake up, see what to do, and then go do it. In the Tao, you are blind and you have to learn how to be blind. You can never see where the Tao is going. You can only be there with it. A blind person walks down a city street with the use of a cane. Let's give that cane a name. It's the seeker of the extremes. It's the feeler of the edges. It's the toucher of the yin and the yang. People who walk with the use of that cane often tap from side to side. They're not trying to find where they should walk. They're trying to find where they shouldn't walk. They're finding the extremes. If you cannot see your way, all you can do is feel for the edges. But if you feel the edges and don't go there, you will stay in the way. That's how you live in the Tao. All the great teachings reveal the way of the center, the way of balance. Constantly look to see if that's where you are living or if you are lost in the extremes. The extremes create their opposites. The wise avoid them. Find the balance in the center and you will live in harmony. And I just want to kind of call something out though on that, because in other chapters we've also talked about bumping up against disturbances, right? And about like where those edges are in terms of creation, right? Like in terms of having that box that we live in and going beyond that, going beyond the fear. So with that, that's a slightly different thing. That's that thing of like the edges of the box that keep us from actually experiencing what's in the moment. So these are two uses of edges in terms of a concept, but they're actually talking about two different things. So I just wanted to make sure that that is clear, because oftentimes when we bump up against the friction, against the edges, it's actually moving through that, right? Relaxing and releasing, leaning in, embracing, moving forward through it. That actually brings us into the greatness, the superpowers, the new possibilities that we're becoming and growing into. So that is a place where going through the edges is amazing. These edges are the extremes. So we have one chapter left in the book. And so next week, it's chapter 19, and the title is The Loving Eyes of God. So it's just an interesting point of view, and I'm excited to read it with you. And even today, you know, we're talking about the Tao, and there are so many different things that have different words to describe them. So if the concept or the notion of the Tao is not a fit for you right now, it's just a word. And so just tap into the space of it. And what do you know about it? And what does this invite you to that you can play with that will give you more space to play in your life? So, we have one more week. I am looking at doing more read-alongs. So I've been wondering, okay, so what do I choose after this season or after this book? And so I'm not sure when the next season will begin. And I'm thinking The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz as the next read along. So whether you've read that book before or it's new to you, let me know what you think about it, if that's something that you're interested in. And also, if there are any other books that you might like for me to take a look at and consider as a possibility. So thank you guys, those of you who have been here live. It's wonderful to have you and your energy in the reading. Thank you. For those of you who are watching the replay, you're live with me right now. So thank you for being here too. If this is the first episode that you found your way to, then I guess I can take these off now. If this is the first episode that you have found your way to, then please go on back and you can binge watch all the previous episodes and previous chapters, and of course listen as many times as you like. This is a book that that I like to reread, and I have been rereading it actually, not just with you, and there's always something new. And as I say, eat the fish, spit out the bones. Everything might not apply to you today. Or ever, who knows? And those things that can contribute, what can change if you start to play with them, experiment with them, incorporate them into your life and your living. Thank you for being here. I can't wait till next week. I'll see you again next Friday. Please click the notification bell so that you know when I am live, because it's not always the same time, and I'll let you know next week when it will be, best I can, and hope to see you then. Until then, have fun, keep choosing. I wonder what we'll discover next. Goodbye, you guys.